What's up, K-Divas, and welcome back to the channel. This is going to be another hot and steamy pattern tutorial. I'm going to be showing you guys how to make the pattern for this corset style skirt that goes from underneath the bust, around the waist, and down to the hemline, and finishes off sort of like in an A-line silhouette. If you want to see how I make this pattern, make sure to keep on watching. I work from my basic bodice because of sort of the shape that the design has, but if you have a skirt plan, you can also sort of like fine-tune that in a way that works for you. Just work with your measurements so that you have the best outcome possible for this project. So in this video, I show you guys how to make the pattern, and in the next tutorial I show you how to cut and sew it all together, so that way it's sort of like easy to digest at once. So if you want to see how I make this pattern, make sure to keep on watching. Give this video a thumbs up because I know you're going to enjoy it. Like, we know you've been coming back to this channel and you've not subscribed too, so let's not just talk about that now, but as you're watching this video, make sure to subscribe and give it a thumbs up if you enjoy it, and let's get straight into the tutorial. To make the patterns for this skirt, I'm going to be using the following materials. I'm going to be working from my basic bodice. This is cut down to a size 10 from my PDF pattern, which if you haven't seen already, you should go check that out because you can download and use for your own project, and it goes from size 6 all the way to 16 UK size. So I'm going to be working from that pattern for this project. I also have here my pattern master, which I'm going to be using to draw my lines, my pencil, pen, eraser, tape measure, as well as some pattern paper. You also need to think about the following measurements: so your bust, your waist, your hip, as well as how long you want the skirt to be, because it's sort of like a corset-y style that starts from underneath the bust line and goes all the way down to the knee. I'm going to go for like an A-line silhouette and have some boning around the cup, along the front and along the back as well, so there is some structure and definition to the skirt design. So the first thing I've done here is I've traced out the front and the back bodice pattern onto another pattern paper so I can keep that original plan for the future, and I'm going to be planning the design on this traced out patterns here. Starting with the front skirt patterns, I made sure to sort of transfer all of the lines I would need, so my upper chest line, my bust line, my waistline, and my hip line onto this traced out version here. I'm working with a UK size 8 because that is sort of where my body is at the moment, and then I'm going to be making some changes to this plan. First up, I'm going to be marking 1.5 inches below the bust line along the center front edge like so. And then I'm going to go to the bust line and mark 3.5 inches downwards towards that area where you have your waist dart, and I'm going to be marking 0.75 inches inwards from that center front edge because I want to sort of like make a small corner here before dipping it down to make the curved shape that this skirt design has. So I'm going to go on and sort of create that dipping shape all the way around like this, but first I want to sort of define how much I want this to sort of go from the edge, which is about 1.5 inches inwards along the bust line. So using my pattern master, I'm drawing in the cup sort of shape like so. And this is not going to be sort of like really the accurate shape of my bust. It's just going to make that sort of illusion that is cupping my bust line up when I have the skirt on. So now that we sort of have that shape in place, feel free to work with your pattern, your size, so it comes out best for you. So the skirt length itself is 25 inches down from the bust line. Because I am on the shorter side, this skirt is going to be sort of mini for me, and then I'm just squaring that point across so I have a hemline to work with. Make sure you double check that your hip and your waist and everything still sort of correlate with your current body measurements, and the skirt hem itself is 12 inches wide in comparison to my hip, which is about 10 inches. So I'm going to be connecting the hip line to the hemline like so, creating an A-line silhouette. You have the freedom to sort of make this more pencil if you want to. Next up, I'm going to be finding the middle of my dart like so, because I want to divide this front panel into two sides, and that would allow me to really shape and snatch in the waistline of this front piece. So I'm just going to double check that the waistline is sort of the measurements I want it to be, and I'm just taking in any extra measurements in through that dart like so. So I ended up taking in about 0.25 inches on both sides, and I'm curving it inwards like this because this is sort of like meant to be a fitted part of the dress, so you want it to really lay flat underneath the bust, and then it works its way down to the hem. So now that we've sort of made that shaping more clearer, and if you're happy with that, we sort of have the front plan of the dress, and we'll have panel 1 and panel 2. Once you're happy with your front plan, you can go ahead and trace off the separate panels onto fresh pattern paper. I like to work this way because if I make any errors on my plan, I can spot that quickly, correct it before I go in to trace off the actual pattern pieces that I'll be adding my seam allowance and cutting out and using to cut my fabric. So I'm just going in to trace off panel 1 for the front here like so. I'm going to trace all the way around and then go back in and add a seam allowance of at least 1/2 inch. Because we're going to be adding boning to that sort of mid front seam underneath the cup, you want to have enough seam allowance to allow you to pass the boning through easily. Don't forget to also add your notches where necessary so you know where pieces are meant to be joined together. I'm just adding my annotations here. I would need to cut one piece for the main front and then one piece for the dress lining. So this is what the first piece looks like. This is sort of going to be like the mid front that sits right in the middle of the skirt, and then I'm going to go in and trace off and cut out my panel 2, adding my seam allowance, my notches, my grain line, my annotations as well, so I know how many pieces that I need to cut off this pattern. Next up, we're going to be working on the back skirt patterns, and it follows a very similar sort of like timeline as the front. So we have our tray styled back basic bodice like so, and then I'm going to be marking 2.5 inches below the bust line along the center back, and I'm just squaring this out a little bit because I want that edge to be slightly straight, and then I'm going to be connecting it back to the bust line, not all the way across, just so we have a little bit at the edge on the side for that bust to connect to the front. So once you have that shape, you have the freedom to make yours deeper, V-like, whatever shape you want to do it, but I just sort of like this scooped design that I have here. So next up, I'm going in to shape my dart like I did for the front, because the waistline of this size 8 is slightly bigger for my current weight and body. I'm just like shaping it in even more so that when I sort of like cancel out that excess measurement and trace off my panels, I don't have any extra bits that I need to think about when I'm sewing. So that I'm crossing out, and that we wouldn't need to trace off. And then I'm going to go ahead and make my skirt length the same for the back, which is 25 inches from the bust line downwards. So I'm just marking that across like so, and then I'm going to go back in and square this across so we have a hemline for the back of the skirt as well. Just remember to extend that center back line all the way to the hem, square it across, and then connect the hip to the hem. The skirt width is 12 inches, which is 2 inches wider than the hip line of this particular plan here. So once that is connected, the next thing I'm going to be working on is sort of dividing the back dress or the back skirt into 2 pieces. So I have like a panel 3 and a panel 4, sort of like how we had for the front. So I'm just going in here to draw a line that goes through the middle of the dart all the way to the bottom, and then this is going to help me when I'm tracing off the separate panels for the back of the skirt. So I'm going to get some fresh pattern paper and trace off the 2 back panels like so, add my seam allowance of about 1/2 inch, and then cut out the pattern pieces so it looks like this. Remember to add your annotations. Please add your annotations, add your notches, your grain line, which I forgot to do for this particular piece here, so don't be like me. Add your grain lines as well, because that will be very helpful when you're cutting these pattern pieces onto fabric. So these are all of the pattern pieces I'm going to be using to sew the skirt in the second half of this project. In this video, I just wanted to show you guys how to make the patterns, but if you did enjoy the video, please give it a thumbs up. Comment down below if you're going to be recreating this project, and if you're excited to see the twin tutorial, make sure to give this video a thumbs up as well, and I will see you guys in my next one. In the second part of this video, I'm going to be cutting these pattern pieces onto fabric for the main parts, for the lining, and then I'm going to be sewing it all together, adding the zip, adding the boning, making any corrections where necessary, so it is easy for you guys to digest if you want to recreate the projects yourself. But if you enjoyed this video, please let me know down below, and have a good morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are. Bye.